have exhaustively done this study of the science, and they believe that something is in this area.
Shoes means signs of activity, people traveling over this area. It's got to be all in, maybe train.
For more than 230 years, Oak Island has remained one of the world's most infamous unsolved mysteries. Generations of treasure hunters have dug into its soil, followed strange tunnels, uncovered ancient wood, discovered mysterious artifacts, and walked away believing they were finally getting close to the truth. But somehow, the island always seemed to hide one final secret. Now, in 2026, something has reportedly emerged that could change the entire Oak Island story. Advanced scanning and AI-assisted analysis have drawn attention to unusual underground density patterns roughly 90 to 110 feet beneath the surface, including a remarkably dense zone that some interpretations suggest could be associated with a substantial underground structure. If that interpretation is eventually confirmed, this wouldn't simply be another clue in the world's longest treasure hunt. It could indicate that someone intentionally built, sealed, and concealed something beneath Oak Island centuries ago. And that's where the mystery becomes even more disturbing, because this same region has already been connected with strange underground formations, water-filled passages, wooden structures, and other discoveries that have fueled speculation for generations. But what if these clues were never separate? What if they were all parts of one massive hidden system? The implications would be enormous. Some speculative estimates have placed the potential value of a major discovery in the hundreds of millions of dollars, but the real value may not be measured in gold at all. It could be historical. It could force researchers to reconsider who reached Oak Island, why they came here, and what they were desperate to hide. Even more intriguing is the reaction surrounding the newest evidence. When investigators are confronted with an anomaly that could potentially contain a sealed chamber or engineered structure, every decision becomes critical. One wrong move could destroy evidence that has survived for centuries. So the question is no longer simply, where is the treasure? The question is far more frightening. What did someone go to such extraordinary lengths to hide beneath Oak Island? And why has it remained hidden for more than 2 centuries? If the latest evidence is eventually confirmed, 2026 could become the year Oak Island finally gives up the secret that generations of treasure hunters died trying to uncover. And what lies beneath that island may be far more valuable, far more mysterious, and far more important than anyone ever imagined. So stay with us, because we're going deep into the newest clues, the underground anomalies, and the evidence that could bring investigators closer than ever to the truth. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now. Because if Oak Island's biggest secret is finally exposed, you won't want to miss the moment the world discovers what has been hiding beneath the island all along. What were the earliest treasure hunters actually searching for, and why did so many of them fail? The Oak Island story has never been only about what might be buried underground. It is also about the countless people who sacrificed their time, money, and sometimes even their lives while chasing an answer. Since the 1700s, rumors have persisted that an enormous treasure was concealed somewhere beneath the island. Some arrived convinced they would uncover gold and silver, while others believed the island could be hiding royal records, religious relics, or something far more important than ordinary treasure. Every new excavation began with excitement and optimism, yet again and again, that optimism ended in disappointment. Many of the earliest searchers approached Oak Island as if it was simply a normal excavation. They followed whatever clues they could see on the surface and assumed that digging deeper would eventually lead them directly to the prize. What they failed to understand was the possibility that the underground environment itself could be part of the mystery. The deeper they went, the more complicated everything became. Soil became unstable, water started pouring into the excavations, and underground passages threatened to collapse. Without modern equipment, accurate surveying, or proper safety procedures, even a small mistake could turn into a disaster. And Oak Island produced plenty of them. Some searchers lost their lives when sudden flooding overwhelmed the workings, while others were trapped or injured when the ground gave way. Each tragedy forced operations to stop temporarily, but curiosity and the promise of unimaginable riches repeatedly brought new groups back to the island. Teams continued digging with limited knowledge and inadequate techniques, repeating many of the same mistakes made by those who came before them. Perhaps their greatest error was assuming that Oak Island was simply a hole in the ground containing something valuable. They did not seriously consider the possibility that the underground layout itself might have been engineered to prevent anyone from reaching whatever had been hidden there. With every failed expedition, the mystery became deeper, more complicated, and harder to explain. At the center of the entire legend stands the infamous money pit and the underground flooding associated with it. To many researchers, the money pit represents much more than an ordinary shaft. Historical accounts describe layers of timber, stone, and unusual construction that appeared as excavations progressed, suggesting that at least parts of the underground system may have been deliberately constructed rather than formed naturally. But the real nightmare began when water suddenly entered the workings. The suspected flood tunnel network connected with the area around Smith's Cove has long been considered one of the most important features of the Oak Island mystery. Once excavators reached certain depths, water could enter through hidden channels and overwhelm the excavation, turning an ambitious treasure hunt into a potentially deadly situation. For generations, researchers have debated whether these passages were intentionally constructed as a defensive system. The apparent positioning of the tunnels, the movement of water, and the difficulty of controlling the flooding have made the theory particularly compelling. Whether every detail of the traditional flood tunnel story is ultimately proven or not, the repeated flooding unquestionably transformed Oak Island into one of the most difficult excavation projects imaginable. Early searchers simply didn't possess the technology necessary to understand what was happening beneath them, let alone safely overcome it. That is why, after centuries of failed attempts, the money pit and its mysterious underground water system remained at the center of the legend. Now, with modern scanning, digital mapping, and advanced analysis available in 2026, researchers can examine the island in ways those early explorers could never have imagined. And if some of the underground patterns really do reveal deliberate engineering, Oak Island could represent something much more sophisticated than a hidden treasure vault. Then came Rick and Marty Lagina, whose approach to the mystery was fundamentally different. When the brothers entered the Oak Island story, they weren't simply looking for a fortune buried beneath the soil. For Rick especially, the island represented a childhood fascination that had stayed with him for decades. That emotional connection gave the search a completely different meaning. Instead of rushing into the ground with shovels and hoping to get lucky, the brothers wanted to understand the island before destroying evidence that might explain it. Science became one of their most important tools. Earlier treasure hunters had depended heavily on intuition, rumors, and physical excavation, but the Laginas increasingly relied on geological information. mapping, drilling data, historical research, and specialists from different fields. Their basic philosophy was straightforward. If humans had constructed something beneath Oak Island, then there should be patterns, engineering logic, and measurable evidence that could eventually reveal its purpose. Patience became just as important as technology. There were periods when months or even years of work produced little that appeared significant, yet they continued. Oak Island had already defeated generations of impatient treasure hunters, and the brothers understood that rushing could destroy the very evidence they were trying to find. Their contrasting personalities also became an important part of the investigation. Rick often responded emotionally to every intriguing discovery, while Marty brought a more skeptical and practical perspective. That combination allowed them to remain fascinated by the mystery without completely abandoning critical thinking. For them, the objective was never simply to walk away with gold. It was to finally understand what Oak Island was hiding. Then, there were the artifacts, discoveries that seemed to raise more questions than answers. Over the years, excavations and investigations produced objects and materials that appeared to come from different periods and regions. Coins and other historical objects fueled speculation that more than one group could have visited the island over the centuries. Among the most debated discoveries were unusual stones and markings that some interpreted as religious or symbolic. Others believed they could represent deliberate signs left by whoever created or used the underground system. Their unusual appearance and disputed interpretations only added another layer to the mystery. Wooden fragments created another major puzzle. Some samples recovered from underground locations were subjected to dating analysis, producing results that attracted considerable attention. If certain pieces genuinely predated periods traditionally associated with major activity on Oak Island, it naturally raises an uncomfortable historical question. Who was using this location, and why? Are conventional historical accounts missing part of the story, or have some discoveries simply been misunderstood? That uncertainty is precisely what has kept Oak Island alive for so long. Every artifact seems to provide one possible answer while simultaneously creating several new questions. The island gradually stopped being just a treasure hunt and became a much broader historical mystery, involving archaeology, engineering, exploration, and the possibility that something important happened there that has not yet been fully explained. By 2026, however, the investigation had entered an entirely different technological era. The search was no longer dependent on digging first and asking questions later. Researchers could now use sophisticated tools to examine what might be hidden beneath the surface before committing to another major excavation. One of the most intriguing developments involved the use of AI-assisted analysis, where historical information and modern survey data could be processed together to identify patterns that might otherwise remain unnoticed. Instead of looking at isolated readings, researchers could examine the underground environment as a three-dimensional system. Ground-penetrating radar provided another layer of information, allowing investigators to examine subsurface boundaries and identify areas where soil, rock, voids, or other materials behaved differently from their surroundings. Density mapping added yet another perspective, helping researchers distinguish unusual underground zones from ordinary geological formations. Suddenly, the island could be studied from multiple angles without immediately destroying the evidence beneath it. But the atmosphere surrounding these discoveries was not simply excitement, it was tension. Everyone understood that finding an unusual underground signature was only the beginning. If further investigation confirmed that the anomaly represented a human-made structure, the next stage could become one of the most delicate operations ever attempted on Oak Island. After centuries of failed searches, the question was no longer just whether something existed beneath the island. The question was whether modern technology had finally given researchers the ability to understand it without making the same mistakes that had defeated everyone who came before them. Some discoveries don't bring celebration. Sometimes they bring responsibility, danger, and decisions where one mistake can cost a human life. As the investigation on Oak Island moved deeper, the biggest concern was no longer simply what might be hidden beneath the ground. It was whether anyone could safely reach it. The moment investigators consider entering or drilling toward a sealed underground structure, water becomes one of the greatest threats. Oak Island has repeatedly demonstrated how quickly underground excavation can trigger flooding, and the presence of unstable soil, weakened rock, and suspected underground voids makes every operation extremely unpredictable. If a drill or cutting tool were placed in the wrong location, it could potentially break into an existing water channel or destabilize an already fragile section of the underground system. A sudden collapse could trap workers with almost no warning. And this isn't a theoretical fear. Oak Island's long history includes serious accidents and fatalities, which makes every modern operation carry an enormous responsibility. The objective may be to uncover the truth, but no discovery is worth risking someone's life. And that brings us to one of the oldest questions surrounding the island. Who could have created something like this in the first place? There is no definitive answer, and anyone claiming to know exactly who built the system would be making a much stronger statement than the evidence currently allows. Still, several theories have survived because they attempt to explain the unusual combination of underground construction, secrecy, and protection. The Knights Templar are among the most frequently mentioned possibilities, particularly because of theories connecting them with hidden treasures, religious artifacts, and unexplained journeys. Other theories point toward medieval merchants, sailors, or wealthy travelers who may have needed a secure location to conceal valuable cargo. During periods when piracy and theft along major sea routes were serious threats, hiding valuable possessions somewhere difficult to access would have made practical sense. If an underground system was deliberately designed to flood when disturbed, it could have functioned as an extraordinary form of protection. But there is another possibility that makes the mystery even more interesting. Perhaps what was hidden wasn't primarily gold at all. Royal objects, weapons, insignia, religious artifacts, or objects connected to powerful historical figures could carry enormous significance. In many cases, the historical importance of an artifact can make it more valuable than the precious metal from which it was made. A unique object recovered from a site with an extraordinary history could become priceless to historians and collectors alike. But among all the possibilities, ancient manuscripts and documents could potentially be the most important discoveries of all. Imagine uncovering a document that provides evidence for a forgotten expedition, a lost settlement, or a previously unknown chapter of transatlantic history. Its value couldn't simply be measured in dollars. It could change what historians believe about the past. This is why speculative estimates sometimes place the potential financial value of a major Oak Island discovery somewhere in the hundreds of millions. But the historical value could be impossible to calculate. The consequences would become even greater if physical evidence challenged established historical timelines. Much of what we know about early exploration of North America is based on archaeological evidence, written records, and historical interpretations built over generations. A genuinely authenticated discovery on Oak Island that demonstrated previously unknown European or other transatlantic activity before Columbus would force historians to re-examine those interpretations. Textbooks could eventually change. Academic debates that have remained unresolved for decades could suddenly become relevant again. Questions about who reached North America first, when they arrived, and what they were doing there could take on an entirely new significance. Oak Island would no longer be viewed simply as a mysterious island associated with a legendary treasure hunt. It could become a physical piece of evidence in one of history's most important debates. And that is exactly why the possibility is so exciting and so sensitive. The discovery of treasure would make headlines, but the discovery of evidence capable of rewriting history could echo for generations. Yet just as the investigation appeared to be moving toward its most important stage, new obstacles began appearing. Plans that seemed ready one day could suddenly change the next. Equipment could be prepared, crews could be positioned, and then an unexpected instruction could bring the operation to a halt. Sometimes there was no immediate explanation and no clear indication of when work could resume. Naturally, that creates questions. Was it simply a technical delay? Was there a safety concern that had not been publicly explained? Or was something else happening behind the scenes? There is no responsible way to claim an intentional cover-up without evidence, but the uncertainty itself adds another layer of tension to an already complicated investigation. Throughout history, major discoveries have often been accompanied by unexpected obstacles, and on Oak Island, every delay seems to make the mystery even more compelling. Eventually, the team reaches a decision that cannot be avoided forever: stop or continue. On one side is the possibility of discovering evidence that could transform everything researchers believe about Oak Island. On the other is the very real responsibility of protecting the people who have spent years pursuing that answer. Going directly into an unstable underground environment could expose workers to flooding, collapsing structures, trapped air, or other hazards that cannot be predicted with certainty. This is no longer a simple question of whether a machine can drill deep enough. It is a human decision, and that makes it far more difficult. For Rick Lagina, this moment is deeply personal. After a lifetime of searching for answers, the truth may finally be within reach, but moving forward could put people at risk. Marty understands the same danger from a different perspective. The discovery matters, but protecting the team matters more. And that leaves Oak Island at a critical crossroads. Risk everything for the truth, or wait for a safer way to uncover it. If you want to follow this mystery until the truth is finally revealed, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because the next discovery could be the one that changes everything.